My own granddaughter snatched the glasses right off my face, snapped them clean in half, and laughed while I stood there blinking into a blur of shadows. "Oh my God, Grandma," she giggled, waving the broken frames in the air. "How are you even gonna see now? You're basically blind." Her friends laughed too. That sharp, careless teenage laughter that slices deeper than any knife. And before I could even gather my dignity, before I could bend down to feel for the pieces on the floor, she pushed me backward into my bedroom and slammed the door. Then I heard the click. The lock. "You can stay in there till you learn not to touch my stuff," she shouted through the door. "Let's see how you survive without your precious glasses." And then footsteps. Fading. Music blasting downstairs. Laughter again. I stood there in the dark. Because without my glasses, everything might as well have been dark. My hands shaking, my chest tight, my own granddaughter turning my weakness into entertainment. And that was the moment something inside me changed. But before I tell you what I did to make sure she never touched my things again, you need to understand how it got this far. My name is Margaret Collins. I am 72 years old. I raised 3 children. I buried my husband of 46 years. I worked as a nurse for nearly 4 decades in Chicago. I survived cancer. I survived grief. But nothing prepared me for being humiliated in my own house by a 16-year-old girl I used to rock to sleep. Her name is Kayla. When my son and his wife moved back in temporarily, after some financial trouble, I opened my doors without hesitation. Of course I did. That's what mothers do. That's what grandmothers do. Temporary turned into 8 months. 8 months of slammed doors. 8 months of eye rolls. 8 months of being treated like outdated furniture. Kayla especially had changed. When she was little, she used to sit in my lap and trace the wrinkles on my hands like they were treasure maps. Now she barely looked at me unless she needed something. And that morning, the morning of the glasses, it started with something so small. I had moved her designer sunglasses off the kitchen counter because they were sitting near the sink. I didn't want them to get splashed. That was it. That was my crime. "Why are you always touching my stuff?" she snapped. "I was just protecting them, honey," I said gently. "I don't need you protecting anything. You can't even see straight." And before I could respond, she reached forward, pulled my reading glasses off my face, the ones I need because I have macular degeneration, and twisted them. The crack was loud. Louder than it should have been. Maybe because it wasn't just plastic breaking. It was respect. It was patience. It was the last fragile thread of me pretending everything was fine. When she locked me in that room, I could hear her downstairs telling her friends, "She's so dramatic. She'll be fine." Fine. I shuffled toward the door and tried the handle. Locked. I blinked hard, trying to adjust to the blur. Without my glasses, shapes melt. Depth disappears. The world becomes unsafe. And here I was, 72 years old, trapped in my own bedroom. I felt along the wall until my fingers found the edge of my dresser. My heart was pounding harder than it had during chemo treatments. I was angry, yes, but underneath that anger was something worse. Hurt. How do you explain to someone you changed diapers for that dignity still matters when you're old? How do you tell them blindness isn't funny? I moved slowly, memorizing the room through touch. Bedpost. Nightstand. Lamp cord. I sat down carefully on the edge of the bed. For a moment, just a moment, I felt sorry for myself. But then something steadied inside me. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't powerless. And if she thought locking me in a room would scare me into submission, she had forgotten who she was dealing with. I may not have been able to see clearly, but I could still think clearly. And thinking clearly is far more dangerous. I reached into the drawer of my nightstand, the one nobody knows about, and felt the cool metal of my emergency cell phone. The one I keep charged. The one I never told them about. Because when you've lived as long as I have, you learn something important. Never let anyone think you don't have a backup plan. And that was just the beginning. Because getting out of that locked room blind, that was the easy part. What I did after I stepped out of that door, that's what changed everything. And trust me, by the time I was done, Kayla never laughed at my blindness again. The first thing I did after feeling that little emergency phone in my hand was sit very still. Not because I was afraid, Because I was calculating. You don't survive 72 years in this world, raising children, managing hospitals at 3 a.m., handling life and death emergencies, by panicking in locked rooms. You breathe. You assess. You act. My vision without glasses is a watercolor painting someone spilled water on. Colors bleed. Edges disappear. I can see light, shadow, large shapes. But details? Gone. And Kayla knew that. That's why she thought locking me in was funny. I pressed the power button on the small backup phone and held it close to my face. The screen was a blur of brightness, but I didn't need to see it clearly. I had memorized the layout months ago. Speed dial number 1. Emergency services. Speed dial number 2. My neighbor, Mr. Thompson, retired firefighter, widower, and the only man on this block who still checks on people instead of scrolling past them. But I didn't call yet. Not immediately. Because this wasn't just about getting out. This was about teaching a lesson that would last longer than one afternoon. I slid off the bed slowly and moved toward the door again, using the wall as my guide. My shoulder brushed the light switch. I flipped it on out of habit, though it didn't make much difference to my blurred world. The handle rattled when I tried it again. Still locked. From downstairs, bass-heavy music vibrated faintly through the floorboards. Laughter erupted. Kayla's voice rose above it all, confident, careless. She'll calm down. She always does. Always. That word sat heavy in my chest. Yes, I always did calm down. I always forgave. I always excused. She's just a teenager. She doesn't mean it. She's going through a phase. Well, today the phase was over. I ran my hands along the doorframe until I felt the old brass hinges. And then I remembered something. This house was built in 1984. My late husband, God rest his soul, insisted on solid doors and traditional hardware. The kind with manual lock mechanisms, not modern smart locks. Which meant one thing. If she locked it with a standard key, there was still a release slot on the outside. But from the inside, there was a tiny pinhole mechanism in the knob, designed for privacy locks. All it takes is a straight object. I smiled to myself. Teenagers think they invent rebellion. They forget who invented survival. I made my way carefully back to the dresser. Second drawer. Sewing kit. My fingers moved through thread spools, fabric scraps, buttons, until I found a long metal knitting needle. Slowly, carefully, I returned to the door. My knees protested. My heart pounded, not from fear but from determination. I inserted the needle into the small hole in the doorknob, blind, steady, listening to the faint vibration of music below. Push. Adjust. Push again. Click. The softest sound in the world. But to me it sounded like thunder. The handle turned. The door opened. And I stood there in the hallway, blinking into a blur of motion and light. Free. Now, I could have marched downstairs immediately. I could have screamed, scolded, created a dramatic scene in front of her friends. But humiliation teaches nothing except defensiveness. No. I needed something smarter. I walked slowly to the top of the staircase and gripped the railing. Without my glasses, stairs are dangerous. Depth perception disappears, and a misstep at my age can mean a broken hip. And Kayla knew that too, which is why she assumed I wouldn't dare come down. I descended one step at a time. Careful. Quiet. By the time I reached the bottom, her friends were too busy recording TikToks in the living room to notice me standing in the archway. Kayla was mid-laugh, holding up her phone. And then she just stood there squinting like. Her voice died when she saw me. Because I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even angry. I was calm. And calm is terrifying when you've done something wrong. Her friends fell silent. Grandma, she said confused. How did you? You locked the door incorrectly, I replied evenly. You should research hardware before attempting imprisonment. One of her friends snorted nervously. Kayla's face flushed red. We were just joking. Jokes, I said softly, are funny to everyone involved. The room went so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I stepped forward slowly. Please gather your things and leave my home. Wait, what? Kayla blinked. I will not be disrespected in my own house. Your friends have 5 minutes. Her friends didn't argue. They grabbed their purses and hurried toward the door whispering. Kayla stood frozen. You're overreacting. No, I said calmly. I've been underreacting for 8 months. She didn't like that. I could hear it in her breathing. And when the front door shut behind her friends, and it was just the two of us standing there, that's when she realized this wasn't over. Because getting out of the room? That was survival. What I did next? That was strategy. And by the end of the week, Kayla would understand something very clearly. Blind does not mean powerless. And grandmother does not mean weak. But she was about to learn that the hard way. When the front door shut behind her little audience, the house felt different. Quieter. Heavier. Kayla stood in the middle of the living room. Arms crossed, jaw tight, trying to look unbothered. But I've raised teenagers before. I know the difference between confidence and panic. Grandma, it was just a joke, she repeated, softer this time. I walked past her slowly, using memory instead of sight to guide me toward the kitchen counter. I could feel her watching me, waiting for an explosion. She didn't understand yet. Explosions are temporary. Control is permanent. I placed my hand on the counter and turned toward where I knew her voice had been. You locked me in a room knowing I can barely see without my glasses. You're not blind, she muttered. I have macular degeneration. I said evenly. You've come to doctor appointments with me. You've heard the specialist explain it. Silence. That hit her. But she still wasn't ready to surrender. You're acting like I committed a crime. I paused. Then I said something very carefully. You did. That word landed heavy. Her posture shifted. What? You restrained an elderly person in a locked room against their will. That is legally considered unlawful confinement. Her eyes widened just a fraction. I continued calmly. I worked in hospitals for 40 years, Kayla. I know the difference between a prank and something that can destroy a person's life. She scoffed, but it was weaker now. You wouldn't call the cops on me. I let that hang in the air. Because the truth? I didn't want to, but I needed her to understand that I could. Instead, I walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out my spare house key. The one her father doesn't even know I keep hidden. I placed it on the counter. Pack your things. Her head snapped up. What? You and your parents have been staying here under the understanding that this is temporary and respectful. Today proved it is neither. You're kicking us out? Her voice cracked just slightly. I am setting a boundary. Dad will lose his mind. That is between your father and me. She started pacing. You're seriously ruining everything over this? I turned toward her voice and took a step closer. No, Kale. You ruined something today. And it wasn't my glasses. Her breathing grew uneven. For the first time I could hear it, not anger. Fear. Because teenagers test limits assuming there aren't any. When they finally find one, it shakes them. You don't mean it, she whispered. I reached into my sweater pocket and slowly pulled out the broken frames. I held them up. These cost $487. But what you broke was worth more than that. Her lip trembled. She looked away. And for just a second, I saw the little girl who used to hold my hand crossing the street. But softness without strength creates monsters. So I stayed steady. You will apologize, I said quietly. Not because you were caught. Because you understand. She swallowed hard. I said I was joking. That is not an apology. Her eyes filled with tears, frustrated tears. I'm sorry you're so sensitive. And there it was. Deflection. Blame shifting. Classic. I nodded slowly. Thank you for clarifying. Then I did something she absolutely did not expect. I picked up my emergency phone from my pocket. And I dialed. Not 911. Speed dial number 2. Mr. Thompson answered on the second ring. Margaret? Everything okay? His voice, steady, kind, carried through the speaker. Could you come over for a moment, please? I asked calmly. Kayla's eyes went wide. What are you doing? I need a witness, I said evenly. To what? To accountability. Mr. Thompson arrived in under 4 minutes. When he walked through the front door, tall, broad-shouldered, former firefighter energy filling the room. Kayla suddenly looked very small. He took one look at my face. What happened? I didn't dramatize it. I simply said, Kayla locked me in my bedroom after breaking my medical glasses. His jaw tightened. Is that true? He asked her directly. Kayla looked between us. Then something inside her cracked. Tears spilled over. I didn't think. I wasn't thinking. No, I said softly. You weren't. Mr. Thompson didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply said, Margaret is 72 years old. A fall down those stairs without vision could have killed her. The word killed hung in the air. And that's when Kayla's shoulders collapsed. Because for the first time, she wasn't being treated like a dramatic teenager. She was being treated like someone who made a dangerous decision. And that realization shook her. I didn't mean, she whispered. I know, I said. But intent does not erase consequence. Mr. Thompson turned to me quietly. Do you want to file a report? Kayla gasped. Grandma, please. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And this was the moment. The turning point. I could press charges. Or I could choose something else. But whatever I chose, it needed to make sure she never, ever confused kindness for weakness again. I turned back to Mr. Thompson. No report, I said calmly. Relief flooded her face. But then I added, not today. And that's when she realized. This wasn't over. Because forgiveness without change was no longer an option. And what I planned next would make sure this lesson lasted longer than any punishment ever could. When Mr. Thompson left, the silence in the house felt different. Heavier. Real. Kayla stood near the staircase, wiping her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, mascara smudged under her eyes. For the first time since this whole thing started, she didn't look defiant. She looked uncertain. Good. Uncertainty is where reflection begins. I walked slowly to the kitchen table and sat down, folding my hands neatly in front of me. Call your father, I said calmly. Her head jerked up. No. Yes. You're going to exaggerate. I don't exaggerate, I replied evenly. That's part of why this will matter. She hesitated, then slowly pulled her phone from her pocket. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed. Her father, my son Daniel, answered on speaker. Hey, what's up? Everything good? Kayla's voice cracked. Dad, Grandma wants to talk to you. There was a pause. Then his tone shifted slightly. Mom, Daniel, I said steadily. I need you to come home immediately. What happened? Your daughter locked me in my bedroom after breaking my prescription glasses. Dead silence. Then, I'm on my way. The line disconnected. Kayla paced. You didn't have to make it sound so bad. I described exactly what happened. You're trying to get me in trouble. No, I said softly. You got yourself in trouble. I'm refusing to hide it. That's what they count on, you know. Teenagers push boundaries assuming adults will soften the story. Minimize it. Protect them from consequences. I had done that for months. Today I stopped. Daniel arrived 22 minutes later. I know because I counted every second. He burst through the front door, briefcase still in hand, tie loosened. What is going on? He looked at Kayla first. Always at Kayla first. She burst into tears immediately. Grandma's overreacting. I broke her glasses, but it was an accident and she locked herself in. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. Daniel looked confused, then turned to me. Mom. I stood up slowly. She removed my glasses from my face intentionally. She snapped them. She pushed me backward into my bedroom and locked the door from the outside. She left me there for over 15 minutes. His expression changed. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just serious. Is that accurate? He asked Kayla. She hesitated. And that hesitation was answer enough. Kayla. Her voice shrank. I didn't think it was a big deal. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. You locked your grandmother in a room. She's acting like I committed a felony. Daniel's jaw tightened. Because you might have. The room went still. I watched him carefully. This was the moment that mattered more than anything. If he laughed it off, if he dismissed it, then nothing would change. But something in his face shifted. He walked over to me. Mom, are you okay? That question, simple, late, but real, landed deeper than he realized. I'm fine physically, I said. Emotionally was another story. He turned back to Kayla. You apologize. Now. She crossed her arms instinctively. I said sorry. You said she was sensitive. Silence. He pointed toward me. You will look at your grandmother and give her a real apology. Kayla's pride fought it. I could see it. But fear was winning. She turned toward me slowly. I'm sorry, she said, barely audible. For? I asked gently. Her eyes filled again. For breaking your glasses. And locking you in the room. And making fun of you. There it was. The truth. I held her gaze. I accept your apology. Relief flashed across her face. But I wasn't done. However, I continued calmly. An apology does not erase consequences. Daniel nodded immediately. You're grounded. That's not my decision, I said. Both of them looked at me. This is my home, I continued. And my safety. Daniel swallowed. What are you saying? I am saying, I replied clearly, that respect is no longer optional here. And until I feel safe in my own house, living arrangements will change. Kayla's head snapped up. You're kicking us out? I am reconsidering the privilege of staying here. Daniel looked stunned. Mom, for 8 months, I have tolerated eye rolls. Disrespect. Dismissiveness. I told myself she was adjusting. That you were stressed. That family means patience. I stepped closer. But patience without boundaries becomes permission. Daniel exhaled slowly. What do you need from us? He asked quietly. That question told me something. He was finally listening. I need acknowledgement that what happened today was serious. It was, he said immediately. I need assurance that my medical needs will never again be mocked. He looked at Kayla. Understood. And, I added, I need to see action. Not fear. Not temporary politeness. Change. Kayla wiped her face again. I didn't think you could get out, she whispered. I looked at her. I've survived things you can't imagine, Kayla. And then I said something she will remember for the rest of her life. Never confuse aging with weakness. The room fell quiet again. Daniel finally spoke. We'll replace your glasses tonight. You will, I agreed. And she will pay for them. Kayla's eyes widened. With what money? Your savings. And your next 2 months of allowance. That's not fair. Daniel didn't hesitate. It is. She looked betrayed. Good. Consequences feel unfair when you're used to escaping them. But here's what neither of them realized yet. Replacing my glasses wasn't the real lesson. That was just the surface. Because what I did next changed the power dynamic in that house permanently. And by the end of the week, Kayla wouldn't just respect me. She would understand me. And understanding hits much harder than punishment ever could. That night, after Daniel drove Kayla to the optometrist's emergency clinic to order new lenses, I sat alone in my living room. Quiet. Still. Not broken. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. I felt awake. When they came back 2 hours later, Kayla's eyes were red from crying. Daniel looked exhausted. A receipt was placed carefully on the kitchen counter. New frames will be ready in 3 days, he said softly. We paid the rush fee. I appreciate that, I replied. Kayla avoided eye contact. And then I did something neither of them expected. Tomorrow morning, I said calmly, we're having a family meeting. Daniel blinked. About what? About structure. Kayla groaned immediately. Oh my God. I raised one hand. And she stopped. That was new. You may be 16, I continued evenly. But you are living under my roof. That means there will be clarity. Daniel studied my face. He could see I wasn't emotional. I wasn't reactive. I was resolved. The next morning at 9 a.m., I sat at the dining table with a printed sheet of paper in front of me. Yes. Printed. Large font. Because even without glasses, I prepare. Kayla shuffled in wearing pajama pants, still irritated. Daniel followed. Sit, I said gently. They did. I slid the paper forward. At the top in bold letters it read, House expectations, effective immediately. Kayla's eyebrows shot up. Daniel let out a slow breath. I began reading aloud. 1. Medical devices including glasses, hearing aids, medications, are not to be touched without permission. Kayla shifted uncomfortably. 2. Locking doors to restrict access to any resident is strictly prohibited. Daniel nodded immediately. 3. Mocking, imitating, or belittling age-related conditions will result in immediate loss of privileges. Kayla opened her mouth to argue. I held her gaze. She closed it. 4. Contribution to household responsibilities will be equal and measurable. Daniel frowned slightly. Mom. I continued. Which means, Kayla, you will assist me with groceries, prescriptions, and any errands involving my vision until further notice. Her head snapped up. What? Why me? Because you need to understand what my daily reality feels like. That's not. It is not punishment, I said calmly. It is perspective. Daniel leaned back slowly. He was thinking. Good. Kayla looked furious. I'm not your nurse. I met her eyes evenly. No. But you are my granddaughter. And empathy is learned through experience. Silence. Then Daniel spoke quietly. She's right. Kayla looked betrayed again. Dad, you crossed a line, he said firmly. You're going to help fix it. She looked at me like I'd orchestrated some elaborate trap. In a way, I had. But not out of cruelty. Out of correction. The next few days were uncomfortable. Kayla had to walk beside me at the pharmacy. She had to read prescription labels aloud. She had to guide me carefully down steps. And for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of responsibility. On the third day, something shifted. We were in the grocery store. I reached for a can on the shelf and misjudged the distance slightly. It slipped. Rolled. She caught it before it hit the floor. Our hands brushed. She froze. I didn't realize, she said quietly. Realize what? How hard it is. Not seeing everything clearly. I didn't respond immediately. I let the moment breathe. It's not the vision loss that hurts the most, I said gently. It's when people treat it like a joke. Her jaw tightened. And for the first time, she didn't look defensive. She looked ashamed. I didn't think about you being scared, she whispered. I was. That landed. Because teenagers rarely imagine adults feeling fear. We finished shopping in silence. But it was different now. Quieter. Not tense. Thoughtful. That night, she knocked on my bedroom door. Knocked. Another first. Come in, I said. She stepped inside slowly. I sold my AirPods, she blurted out. I blinked. Why? To pay for the glasses. You didn't have to do that. Your father already. I know. She swallowed hard. But I wanted to. There it was. Ownership. True ownership. She stepped closer. I'm really sorry. Not just because I got in trouble. I don't know why I thought being mean was funny. I studied her face carefully. This wasn't fear talking. This was growth. It's easier to laugh than to understand, I said softly. She nodded. And then she did something I hadn't expected. She hugged me. Tightly. Like she used to when she was 7. And for a brief second, my heart softened completely. But here's what she didn't know yet. The lesson wasn't over. Because respect isn't proven in one apology. It's proven in consistency. And I had one final step planned. One that would make sure this shift lasted longer than guilt. Longer than grounding. Longer than tears. The next morning, I made a phone call. Not to the police. Not to Mr. Thompson. But to someone who would ensure that Kayla and Daniel understood something very clearly. This house is mine. And staying here is a privilege, not a right. And what I arranged next changed everything permanently. The phone call I made the next morning wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was quiet, strategic, adult. I called my attorney. Not because I wanted to throw my family out onto the street, but because I was done living on assumptions. When you're young, you think love is enough to hold things together. When you're older, you understand something better. Clarity protects love. Margaret, what can I do for you? my lawyer, Susan asked. I need to update my occupancy agreement, I said calmly. And my estate paperwork. There was a pause. Is everything all right? Everything is becoming all right, I replied. That afternoon, Daniel came home to find me at the dining table again, this time with a folder. He looked wary. Mom, what's that? Peace of mind. Kayla hovered behind him. I opened the folder. I've drafted a formal living agreement. Daniel blinked. A lease? Not a lease. A temporary family residency agreement. Kayla muttered, that sounds worse. I ignored that. It outlines expectations, financial contribution, length of stay, and behavioral standards. Daniel looked stunned. You think we'd take advantage of you? I held his gaze steadily. I think unspoken arrangements create blurred boundaries. He exhaled slowly. You don't trust us. No, I said gently. I trust you more when things are clear. Kayla crossed her arms. Are we paying rent now? Yes. Her eyes widened. What? It will be modest, I said evenly. Far below market value. But symbolic. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Mom, I lost my job 3 months ago. You know that. I do, I said. Which is why the amount reflects that. But adults who live in a home contribute to it. Silence. Kayla stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe she didn't. Because for months, I had been the quiet grandmother who made casseroles and stayed out of the way. That woman was still kind. But she wasn't invisible anymore. Daniel finally sat down across from me. What changed? He asked quietly. I didn't hesitate. The lock. He swallowed. You locked me in a room, I continued softly, not even looking at Kayla now. And for 15 minutes, I realized something. What? That I had slowly allowed myself to shrink in my own home. The room went still. I won't do that anymore. Kayla's voice was small. I said I was sorry. And I accept it, I said warmly. This isn't revenge. This is restructuring. Daniel looked down at the papers. And the estate paperwork, he asked carefully. I'm updating it. Kayla's head snapped up again. What does that mean? It means, I replied calmly, that my assets will now be distributed based on demonstrated responsibility and respect. Daniel stared at me. You're changing the will? I am adjusting it. The silence that followed was thick. And here is the truth most people don't like to admit. Nothing clarifies priorities like inheritance. Kayla's face drained slightly. You'd cut us out. I leaned back in my chair. I would redirect portions toward individuals who contribute positively to my well-being. Daniel looked shaken. Mom, that's extreme. No, I said gently. Extreme is waiting until I'm gone to discover I mattered. That landed. Because suddenly, this wasn't about glasses. It wasn't about grounding. It was about legacy. I have volunteered at the Senior Literacy Center for years, I continued. There are children there who treat me with more patience than I've received at home. Kayla looked stricken. You'd give our money away? It isn't your money, I corrected softly. It is mine. And there it was. The line. Clear. Firm. Unapologetic. Daniel finally spoke, voice low. We never thought you felt unimportant. I know, I replied. That's the problem. The room went quiet again. And then something happened I didn't expect. Kayla stepped forward. I don't care about the money, she said quickly. I raised an eyebrow slightly. I care about you not thinking I'm a bad person. Her voice cracked. I messed up. I get it. But don't make it like I don't love you. That right there. That was the real crack in the armor. I softened slightly. This isn't about labeling you, I said gently. It's about shaping you. She wiped her face again, frustrated with herself for crying. I don't want you scared of me, she whispered. I'm not scared of you, I said calmly. I was scared of losing myself. Daniel leaned back slowly, absorbing all of it. The power in the room had shifted. Not to me dominating, but to me defining. Finally, Daniel nodded. Okay, he said quietly. We sign it. Kayla looked at him. Dad. He shook his head gently. She's right. He picked up the pen. Signed. Kayla hesitated. Then she signed too. And just like that, the house felt different. Not tense. Not cold. Structured. Safe. That night, Kayla knocked again before entering my room. Another small but meaningful change. Are you really giving money to the literacy center? She asked softly. Yes. She sat on the edge of the bed. Can I come with you sometime? I studied her face carefully. Why? She shrugged slightly. Maybe I need perspective too. There it was again. Growth. Not forced. Chosen. I nodded. You can. And as she stood to leave, she paused. I won't ever touch your glasses again, she said quietly. I smiled gently. I know. But the real lesson wasn't about glasses. It was about something much bigger. And the final test of whether this transformation would last was coming sooner than any of us expected. Because 2 weeks later, something happened that would reveal whether Kayla truly changed, or whether this was all temporary. And when that moment came, I was watching closely. 2 weeks later, I decided to run a test. Not a cruel one. Not a manipulative one. A revealing one. Because change isn't proven when everyone's watching. It's proven when no one thinks it matters. That Saturday morning, Daniel left early for a job interview. Kayla was downstairs in the kitchen scrolling on her phone, half awake, half interested in the world. I walked in slowly, wearing my new glasses. Then very deliberately I took them off and slipped them into my sweater pocket. I moved toward the cabinet where I keep the coffee mugs. And I misjudged. My hand brushed the edge of a ceramic cup. It tipped, fell, shattered against the tile. The sound cracked through the kitchen. Kayla jumped. Oh my God, Grandma. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, blinking at the blur on the counter. Oh sweetheart, I murmured softly. I didn't see that properly. There was a split second. A tiny microscopic pause. This was the moment. The old Kayla would have sighed dramatically. Maybe laughed. Maybe filmed it. Instead, she moved fast. It's okay, she said immediately. Don't move. Her voice wasn't annoyed. It was protective. She grabbed a towel, carefully nudged me back a step. Glass shards can cut through socks, she added, almost instinctively. I froze internally. She remembered. She crouched down and began picking up the pieces carefully. Are you okay? She asked again, glancing up at me. I've fine. Did any hit you? No. She exhaled in relief. Then she stood up and gently took my hand. Sit down, okay? I'll clean it. No sarcasm. No impatience. Just care. Iset watched her move around the kitchen with focus. She swept thoroughly, checked twice, even ran a damp paper towel over the floor to catch invisible fragments. Invisible. The irony wasn't lost on me. When she finished, she turned back to me. You should keep your glasses on, she said softly. Not scolding. Just concerned. I tilted my head slightly. I forgot. She hesitated, then walked over and gently pulled them from my sweater pocket. She had seen the edge of them. She knew. She placed them in my hands carefully. You don't have to pretend, she said quietly. Our eyes met. Clear this time. What makes you think I was pretending? I asked gently. She gave a small half-smile. Because you walked in here perfectly fine 5 minutes ago. Silence. Then she added. And because you wouldn't drop a mug that easily. I studied her carefully. There was no anger in her face. Just understanding. You were testing me, she said softly. I didn't deny it. She exhaled slowly. I deserved that. That right there. That's growth. I needed to know, I admitted. She nodded. I know. She leaned against the counter. I was awful that day, she said, not defensively. Just truthfully. You were careless, I corrected gently. Not awful. She looked down at her hands. I keep thinking about you in that room. Not being able to see. Probably thinking we were laughing at you. I didn't interrupt. Were you scared? She asked quietly. Yes. Her throat tightened. I hate that. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not relief. Not victory. Peace. I don't want you to be scared of me, she continued. Or because of me. I'm not, I said. I was disappointed. That hit harder than anger ever could. She nodded slowly. Mr. Thompson asked me something yesterday, she added suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, he said. What kind of woman do you want to become? Interesting man, Mr. Thompson. And what did you tell him? I asked. She shrugged slightly. I didn't have an answer. Silence stretched between us. Then she looked at me directly. What kind of woman are you? She asked. It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't challenging. It was genuine curiosity. I leaned back in my chair. I am a woman who survived being underestimated, I said softly, and decided never to underestimate herself. She absorbed that. And what kind of woman do you want to be? I asked gently. She swallowed. One who doesn't need to make someone else small to feel big. There it was. The shift was real. Not forced. Not performative. Chosen. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You're getting there, I said quietly. She squeezed my hand. And for the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like family. But life doesn't test you once. It tests you again. And the real proof came 3 days later, when her friends came back over. The same girls. The same living room. The same house. And one of them laughed and said, Hey Kayla, remember when you locked your grandma in that room? That was savage. I was upstairs. But I heard it. And I waited. Because this was the final exam. And what Kayla did next told me everything I needed to know. I was upstairs when I heard the laughter. That sharp, careless teenage laughter that always carries a little too far. Hey Kayla, remember when you locked your grandma in that room? That was savage. Savage. The word sliced through the floorboards and into my chest. I didn't move. I didn't rush downstairs. I didn't clear my throat to announce my presence. I stayed exactly where I was. Because this moment wasn't about me stepping in. It was about who Kayla had become when I wasn't watching. There was a short pause. Just long enough for my heart to beat twice. And then I heard her voice. Don't say that. It wasn't loud. But it was firm. Her friend laughed awkwardly. What? It was kind of funny. No, Kayla said, sharper now. It wasn't. Silence. I slowly moved closer to the top of the stairs, careful, quiet, listening. You guys don't get it, Kayla continued. She could have gotten hurt. Like really hurt. Another friend chimed in. You're being dramatic. No, Kayla shot back. I was being dramatic. That day. And stupid. The air downstairs shifted. I could feel it. She's not just some old lady, Kayla added. She's my grandma. She raised my dad. She lets us live here. Her voice cracked slightly. She deserves better than that. The room went very quiet. And something inside my chest loosened. One of the girls muttered, Okay, chill. We were just joking. Yeah, well, don't, Kayla replied. Not about that. There was no performance in her tone. No trying to look noble. Just a boundary. A clean one. And I realized something in that moment. She wasn't changing because she was scared of consequences anymore. She was changing because she understood. I stepped onto the first stair deliberately, letting it creak just slightly so they'd know I was coming down. When I entered the living room, the girls stiffened. Teenagers are terrible actors. I smiled gently. Good afternoon. Hi, Mrs. Parker. One of them said too quickly. Kayla looked at me. There was a flicker of nervousness, not fear. Just wondering if I had heard. I met her eyes. And I gave the smallest nod. I heard you. And I'm proud. Her shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Grandma, we're just doing homework, she said. I glanced at the open laptops and untouched notebooks. I'm sure you are, I replied dryly. A few of them laughed awkwardly. But the energy was different this time. No mucking. No whispering. Just normal teenage chatter. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself tea, and returned to the staircase slowly. Halfway up, I paused. Kayla. Yeah. May I speak with you for a moment? Her friends exchanged looks as she followed me upstairs. Once we were in my room, she closed the door behind her. You heard, she said quietly. I did. She stared at the floor. I'm not embarrassed of you, she blurted out. I was embarrassed of myself. That honesty, raw, uncomfortable, meant more than any apology ever could. You didn't have to defend me, I said softly. Yes, I did, she replied immediately. Because if I let them joke about it, then I'm still the same person. I studied her face carefully. No defiance. No pride. Just conviction. What changed? I asked gently. She thought for a moment. You being calm, she admitted. You didn't scream. You didn't call the cops. You just showed me what I did. I nodded slowly. Discipline teaches behavior, I said quietly. Dignity teaches character. She let that sink in. I don't ever want you to feel small in this house again, she said. I felt tears press behind my eyes, not from hurt this time. From something softer. I don't, I told her truthfully. Not anymore. She stepped closer. I told them if they joke about you again, they're not coming over. I raised an eyebrow slightly. That's quite the stance. She shrugged. Peace is better than popularity. Now that was growth. Real growth. I reached out and adjusted a strand of hair from her face, something I hadn't done since she was little. You're becoming the kind of woman you said you wanted to be, I murmured. She gave a small smile. Still working on it. Aren't we all? We stood there for a moment, quiet but steady. The power struggle was gone. In its place, mutual respect. But life has a way of testing progress when you least expect it. Because that evening, something happened that reminded me why I had to draw boundaries in the first place. Daniel came home early. And he wasn't alone. And when I saw who walked in behind him, I realized the next lesson wasn't for Kayla. It was for her father. And this one was going to be harder. When I heard the front door open that evening, I was in the kitchen slicing apples. Kayla was upstairs. Daniel's voice carried in first, tense, forced polite. And then I heard another voice. Female. Sharp. Familiar. Mom. Daniel called out. We're home. That word again. I walked into the hallway slowly, wiping my hands on a dish towel. And there she was. Linda. My former daughter-in-law. Daniel's ex-wife. Kayla's mother. The woman who hadn't stepped foot in this house in 3 years. She stood in my foyer like she still had ownership of the air. Oh, she said, feigning surprise. Margaret. Her perfume hit before her words did. Sweet. Overpowering. Territorial. I kept my posture straight. Linda. Daniel cleared his throat. She just came to talk about Kayla's school transfer paperwork. In my house. I asked calmly. He hesitated. Well, it was quick. Quick. The audacity of that word. Linda crossed her arms lightly. I'm not here to cause trouble. History says otherwise. But I didn't say that. Instead, I glanced toward the staircase. Kayla was halfway down. Frozen. Her face had changed. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Guarded. Interesting. Linda noticed her. There's my girl, she cooed. Kayla didn't move. Hey Mom, she said quietly. No excitement. No ruse. Just politeness. And that told me more than anything else in the room. Linda turned back to Daniel. I still think she should move back with me full-time. This environment is tense. Ah, there it was. Environment. She let the word hang like an accusation. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Linda, we're not doing this. I'm just saying, she continued smoothly. Kayla needs stability. Not family drama. Family drama. In my house. After what her daughter did. I stepped forward slightly. This house, I said evenly, is the reason Kayla has stability. Linda's smile tightened. With all due respect, Margaret, she needs structure. Not emotional power plays. Power plays. That was rich. Before I could respond, Kayla spoke. And her voice was steady. I'm not moving. Both adults turned to her. Linda blinked. Excuse me. I'm not moving, Kayla repeated. I want to stay here. Linda laughed lightly. Honey, you don't know what's best for you. Kayla's shoulders squared. No. But I know what feels safe. Silence. Thick. Daniel looked stunned. Linda's expression shifted from polished to irritated. Safe, she repeated. You're safer with your mother. Kayla shook her head slowly. I locked Grandma in her room 2 weeks ago, she said bluntly. Daniel inhaled sharply. Linda looked confused. What? And she didn't destroy me for it, Kayla continued. She held me accountable. There's a difference. The room felt like it tilted. Linda stared at me. You let her lock you in a room? I did not let her. I corrected calmly. I handled it. Linda scoffed. Handled it by threatening her with legal action? Daniel stiffened. How do you know that? I asked quietly. Linda looked at him. So he told her. He couldn't help himself. He still ran emotional reports to his ex-wife. That was the real issue. Daniel looked cornered. I mentioned it in passing. In passing. I repeated softly. Linda crossed her arms again. See, this is exactly what I mean. She's weaponizing her authority. Weaponizing. Such dramatic language for a woman who once threw a glass at my son during an argument. I looked at Kayla. She was watching carefully. Learning. This moment mattered. So I kept my voice level. I set boundaries, I said calmly. If that feels like a weapon, perhaps you're unfamiliar with them. Linda's jaw tightened. Daniel stepped in quickly. Okay, let's calm down. I turned toward him slowly. No, I said quietly. Let's clarify. He swallowed. This is my home, I continued. You and Kayla are here because I opened my doors. That invitation does not extend to hostility. Linda bristled. I'm her mother. Yes, I agreed. And you are welcome to co-parent. Not to undermine. Kayla stepped closer to me. Physically closer. It wasn't dramatic. It was instinct. I want to stay, she said again. Linda looked at her daughter like she'd been betrayed. You're choosing them over me? Kayla shook her head. I'm choosing respect. That word echoed. Respect. Linda's eyes flicked to me. She saw it then. The shift. Kayla wasn't under my control. She was aligned with my values. Daniel finally found his voice. Linda, the decision stands. Kayla stays. Linda grabbed her purse sharply. This isn't over, she snapped. It doesn't need to be a battle. I replied evenly. Unless you make it one. She stormed toward the door. And just before leaving, she turned to Kayla. You'll understand one day. Kayla didn't flinch. I already do. The door shut. Hard. The house fell silent. Daniel ran a hand over his face. Mom, I didn't think bringing her here would. That was your mistake, I said gently. He nodded slowly. You're right. Kayla looked between us. Then at me. You weren't scared, she said quietly. Of Linda? She nodded. I smiled faintly. I'm not afraid of women who confuse volume with power. Kayla exhaled slowly. And then she said something that told me everything had truly changed. I want to be strong like that. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Strength isn't loud, I said softly. It's steady. Daniel looked at both of us. And for the first time in a long time, he looked like a son again. Not a divided man. Not a confused father. Just my child. I should have protected this house better, he admitted quietly. Yes, I said. No anger. Just truth. And that night, after Kayla went upstairs, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table. And he asked me a question he hadn't asked in years. Mom, did I let you down? The answer to that wasn't simple. And what I told him next changed our relationship in a way even Kayla didn't see coming. Because sometimes, the final lesson isn't for the teenager. It's for the grown child who forgot who raised him. When Daniel asked me, Mom, did I let you down? He didn't look defensive. He looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. And that mattered. I didn't answer right away. I poured us both a cup of coffee and sat across from him at the kitchen table. The same table where he used to do homework, where I signed permission slips, where I once stayed up all night sewing patches onto his little league uniform, because we couldn't afford a new one. I didn't raise a weak man, I said finally. He blinked. That's not what I asked. I know, I replied softly. Silence settled between us. Ush. You didn't let me down. I continued carefully. But you forgot something. What? You forgot that protecting your peace doesn't mean avoiding conflict. He looked down at his hands. I was trying to keep everyone calm. At whose expense? That question landed. He leaned back slowly. I thought if I stayed neutral, things wouldn't explode. Neutrality, I said gently, always sides with the loudest person in the room. His jaw tightened. Linda had always been loud, demanding, overwhelming, and he had spent years navigating around her storms instead of standing in them. I didn't want Kayla caught in the middle, he admitted. She wasn't in the middle, I replied. She was watching. He looked up at that. She watches how you handle pressure, how you treat women, how you respond when someone disrespects your mother. He winced slightly. And what did she see? He asked quietly. She saw hesitation. The truth doesn't need to be cruel to be powerful. He nodded slowly. I thought bringing Linda here would show I'm mature, that I can co-parent peacefully. There's nothing peaceful about inviting chaos into a stable space, I said. He exhaled sharply, almost a laugh at himself. I guess I still revert to survival mode with her. I know, I said softly. And I did. I remembered the early years of his marriage. The arguments. The way he shrank himself to avoid escalation. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me I was handling it wrong? I gave him a small smile. Because grown men don't learn from lectures. They learn from consequences. And this was one. Yes. He looked around the kitchen slowly. You really would have asked us to leave if things didn't change. Yes. No hesitación. He nodded once. I believe you. And something shifted in his posture. A straightening. A remembering. I won't let anyone disrespect you again, he said quietly. I don't need a hero, I replied. I need a son who understands boundaries. He met my eyes. You have one. Upstairs, I heard Kayla moving around her room. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The house felt steady again. But I wanted to make something clear before the night ended. Daniel, I said gently. When Kayla locked me in that room, I wasn't just scared because I couldn't see. He swallowed. I was scared because I realized how quickly people assume older women are powerless. His face tightened. I never saw you that way. I know, I said. But you didn't actively correct it either. That truth sat heavy. She needed to see you choose respect out loud. I continued. And now she has. He nodded slowly. She defended you today, he said. I heard. A small smile touched my lips. I didn't tell her to. That's the point, he replied. Exactly. Growth that isn't forced lasts longer. He stood up and walked around the table, something he hasn't done in years, and hugged me. Not the quick one-armed hug. A real one. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. I chuckled softly. You should be proud of yourself. You listened. He pulled back slightly. You know, Kayla told me something in the car earlier. Oh, she said, Grandma isn't scary. She's solid. Solid. I liked that. Not dramatic. Not loud. Not fragile. Solid. The next morning, I was sitting on the porch with my coffee when Kayla joined me. She sat beside me quietly. You win, she said lightly. Ich glänzte her. This was never about winning. She smiled faintly. I know. It was about respect. Yes. She looked out at the street. I used to think getting older meant becoming irrelevant. I raised an eyebrow. And now I think it means you've seen enough to stop tolerating nonsense. I laughed, a real full laugh. That's one way to put it. She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. I'm glad you got out of that room, she said softly. So am I. But here's the truth I carry now. The day she locked me in wasn't the day I became strong. I was always strong. It was the day I decided to stop shrinking. And in doing that, I didn't just teach my granddaughter a lesson. I reminded my son who raised him. And I reminded myself of something even more important. Blindness does not mean helpless. Age does not mean invisible. And respect is not given because you demand it. It's given because you embody it. And in this house now, we don't mock weakness. We build strength. Together. If this story touches your heart, please like, comment and subscribe my channel.